I'm standing at the head of my grandfather's Christmas dinner table, watching my aunt stick a post-it note on a Tiffany lamp that says property of Karen in Sharpie, and I swear to God, I can hear my dead grandmother rolling in her grave. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold, Grandpa. Arthur wasn't dead. He was upstairs, supposedly in a coma, supposedly dying, and they were already dividing up his stuff, like vultures picking at a corpse that's still breathing. My Uncle Bob, this 62-year-old man in a $3,000 suit, actually laughed when I asked him to stop. He looked me dead in the eye, turkey leg in one hand, and said, "You're just a nurse, kid. When the old man kicks it tonight, you're out on the street with nothing." The crazy part, he said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My cousin Sarah nodded. My aunt's husband clinked his wine glass in agreement. They'd already decided I was nobody. Just the 24-year-old grandson who'd given up college, relationships, and any shot at a normal life to change Grandpa's diapers and make sure he didn't choke on his oatmeal. Yeah, just that guy. But then something happened that I'll remember until the day I die. That baby monitor in the center of the table that one Aunt Karen had set up to make sure we'd know when he stopped breathing or actual words. I swear it crackled with static. Everyone froze. And then... oh God. And then Grandpa Arthur's voice came through, crystal clear, strong as a lion. "Bob, get your greedy hands off my silverware. Karen, stop drinking my 1982 Bordeaux like it's boxed wine." The room exploded into chaos. Karen dropped her glass for $100, Baccarat crystal, shattered everywhere. Bob's face went ghost white, then purple, then back to white. My cousin Sarah literally ran to the bathroom and threw up. And me? I just stood there, trying not to smile, because I'd been in on the plan from the beginning. See, Grandpa wasn't in a coma. He wasn't even upstairs anymore. That old Marine had been sitting in his study for the past 2 hours with his estate attorney, Mr. Sid Emerson, changing his will while listening to every single word his children said on that baby monitor. And now, the door to the dining room opened. Mr. Henderson walked in, leather briefcase in hand, and Grandpa's voice came through one more time. "I'm not in a coma, you idiots. I was just waiting for the right moment. And I just signed a new will 5 minutes ago. Leo, show them what they've won. Let me take you back 6 hours earlier. Before the chaos, before the reveal, back when the house was still quiet and smelled like cinnamon and pine instead of greed and desperation. I was upstairs in Grandpa's bedroom, spooning chicken soup into his mouth, the good homemade kind. Not that canned garbagand. He looked at me with those sharp blue eyes that hadn't dulled one bit despite 85 years on this planet. He winked. Actually winked at me. And then he said, in a voice that was supposed to be weak and dying, "Today we're gonna see who's who, son." Put that baby monitor on the dining table, front and center. And Leo... don't you dare crack a smile no matter what they say. I should have known right then that he was planning something nuclear. Grandpa Arthur wasn't just a retired Marine Corps colonel, he was a strategist, a chess player. The kind of man who planned DD invasions before breakfast and hostile corporate takeovers before lunch. But I played along. I set up the monitor like he asked, tested the connection twice, and then I waited. And God, I wasn't ready for what came next. The first car pulled up at 3 p.m. sharp. A black Mercedes S-Class polished, so bright it looked like a mirror. Aunt Karen, she didn't ring the doorbell. Just used her old key and walked in like she owned the play switch. In her mind, she already did. She breezed past me in the hallway without a word. Not "Merry Christmas, Leo." Not "How's Dad doing?" Not even eye contact. She had 2 people with hair, a man and a woman in business casual, both carrying those little leather notebooks. "Oh, these are my friends from the club," she said when I asked. But I knew better. Those were real estate appraisers. She'd brought them to value the house during Christmas dinner. 20 minutes later, Uncle Bob showed up in a Porsche Cayenne that still had the dealer tags on it. Brand new. Probably financed, knowing Bob's gambling debts. He walked in with his wife Linda, and the very first thing out of his mouth was, "Has the old man croaked yet?" Not "How is he?" Not "Can I see him?" Just, "Has he croaked yet?" I felt something twist in my chest, something hot and angry, but I remembered Grandpa's words. Don't crack a smile. Don't show your hand. So I just said, "He's upstairs resting," and Bob grinned. Actually grinned. "Gid, That means we're still on schedule. I watched them all gather in the living room, and I swear it was like watching sharks circle a wounded seal. Karen's friends were measuring the crown molding with their eyes. Bob was Googling estate lawyers near me on his phone. I saw the screen. And then Karen said something that made my blood freeze. She was talking to Bob in a low voice, but I was standing just around the corner, and I heard every word. If he hangs on too long, we'll have to put him in one of those state-run nursing homes. The cheap ones. We can't keep hemorrhaging money on his care. He's already burned through $200,000 in the last year alone. Bob nodded. Once we get control of the accounts, we'll move him somewhere economical. He won't know the difference anyway. That's when I understood. They weren't here for Christmas. They weren't here to say goodbye to their father. They were here to start the bidding war over his corpse while his heart was still beating. And the worst part, they had no idea that corpse was wide awake upstairs, listening to every single word, planning their destruction with the precision of a man who'd orchestrated military campaigns in 3 different wars. I went back upstairs, and Grandpa looked at me with this calm, cold smile. "Did you hear that, son?" I nodded. He patted my hand. "Good. Now let's give them enough rope to hang themselves." Dinner started at 6 p.m. And I need you to understand something. This wasn't a Christmas dinner. This was a corporate negotiation disguised as a family gathering. The table was set beautifully. Sure, Grandma's fine china, the silver candlesticks, a perfectly roasted turkey that I'd spent 4 hours preparing while they were upstairs, measuring the square footage of bedrooms. But the moment everyone sat down, the illusion shattered. Nobody said grace. Nobody talked about memories or traditions. Karen looked at Bob and said, "Point blank, I deserve the beach house because I'm the eldest. That's how inheritance works." Bob nearly choked on his wine. "The hell you do. You already took all of Mom's jewelry when she died. The business is mine. I'm the only one with an MBA." And just like that, they were off. It was like watching 2 pit bulls fight over a steak, except the steak was my grandfather's entire life's work, and he wasn't even dead yet. My cousin Sari, Bob's daughter, joined in. "Actually, Daddy, I think I should get the beach house. I have kids. They need a place to make memories." Karen's eyes went cold. "Your kids are spoiled brats who'd trash the place in a weekend." "Sweetheart, I was sitting at the far end of the table, the servant's seat, the kids' table spot, even though I was 24 years old and had been the only one taking care of Grandpa for 3 straight years, and they treated me exactly like that, like the help." Karen snapped her fingers at me. Actually snapped. "Leo, be a dear and bring out the 1982 Bordeaux from the cellar. The good stuff we're celebrating." I wanted to tell her that bottle was worth $3,000 and Grandpa had been saving it for my wedding day, but I didn't. I just nodded, went to the cellar, and brought it up. And I watched her pour it like it was $12 Trader Joe's wine, filling her glass to the brim, not even letting it breathe. Bob was worse. He kept ordering me around like I was his personal waiter. "Leo, clear these plates. Leo, get me more ice. Leo, my napkin, Phil, pick it up." At one point, he actually threw a wadded up napkin at me across the table and laughed when it hit my chest. "Good reflexes, nurse boy. You'll need those skills when you're looking for a new job next week." The whole table laughed. Even Sarah, who I used to babysit when she was 7, they laughed like I was a joke, like I was nothing. But here's what they didn't know. That baby monitor sitting in the center of the table, right between the turkey and the cranberry sauce. It wasn't just transmitting sound upstairs to Grandpa's bedroom anymore. 20 minutes earlier, I'd switched it to a secure conference call line. Grandpa wasn't in bed. He was in his study with Mr. Henderson, the family attorney, listening to every single word on speakerphone while signing paperwork. Legal, binding, ironclad paperwork, and every insult, every greedy demand, every disgusting comment was being recorded. Audio evidence, time-stamped, legally admissible. Karen was in the middle of explaining why she deserved the stock portfolio when Bob interrupted her. "Forget the stocks. I want the house. This house, it's worth $4 million easy, and I've already got a buyer lined up." My heart stopped. Karen's face went purple. "You've got a WHAT, Bob shrugged. "A developer, Chinese investment group. They'll tear it down and build condos. I'll clear $2 million after fees. This house, The house where Grandpa proposed to Grandma. The house where my mom grew up. The house where I'd lived for the past 3 years, sacrificing everything to take care of the man who raised me when my parents died. And Bob was going to bulldoze it for a condo development. I looked at that baby monitor, and I swear I could feel Grandpa's rage radiating through it like heat from a furnace. But his voice never came through. Not yet. He was waiting, letting them dig the grave deeper, letting them reveal exactly who they were when they thought no one was watching. And me, I just sat there at the end of the table, John's folded fasci notro, thinking about the fact that in about 2 hours, every single one of these people was going to learn what it feels like when karma comes. Dressed in a 3-piece suit, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents, but I didn't know it would happen so soon. I didn't know the next twist was already walking up the driveway. Around 7:30 p.m., Karen stood up from the table, dabbed her mouth with a napkin like she was royalty, and announced, "I suppose we should go see him. For appearance's sake." Dot Singh waits appearance's sake. Not because she loved him, not because he might actually be dying, but because it would look bad if they didn't. Bob nodded, already halfway through his 3rd glass of that $3,000 wine. "Yeah, let's get it over with. I want to check that safe in his room anyway. See what the old man's been hiding." They went upstairs together, and I followed at a distance close enough to hear everything, far enough that they forgot I existed. That's the thing about being treated like furniture for 3 years. You learn how to be invisible. I stood in the hallway outside Grandpa's bedroom door while they went in, and what I heard next made me want to break through that door and throw them both out the window. But I didn't. I stayed frozen, listening, because Grandpa had told me, let them talk. Leo, people reveal their true souls when they think no one's listening. Karen approached the bed first. Grandpa was lying there, eyes closed, breathing shallow through the oxygen tube in his nose. I'd helped him set up the scene before dinner, even put that heart rate monitor on his finger so the beeping would sound authentic. He looked frail, helpless, like he was standing at death's door. And Karen looked down at him with nothing. No love, no sadness, just cold calculation. She leaned in close and whispered, "You stubborn old bastard. You should have died last year before you burned through another $200,000 on treatments. Do you have any idea how much of my inheritance you've wasted just to buy yourself a few extra months? Selfish. That's what you are." I felt bile rise in my throat. This was her father. The man who paid for her entire college education, who gave her $100,000 to start her boutique business that failed within a year, who walked her down the aisle at her wedding. And she was standing over his deathbed, calling him selfish for wanting to live. But it got worse, so much worse. Bob walked past her, straight to the antique safe in the corner of the room. It was a beautiful thing. 1920 segundos era gold filigree combination lock. Grandpa kept his most valuable documents in there. Bonds, stock, certificates, the deed to the beach house. Bob knelt down and started spinning the dial, trying random combinations. "What the hell is the code?" He muttered his birthday. "Mom's birthday. Damn it." He tried 5 or 6 combinations, getting more frustrated with each failure. And then I swear to God, he kicked the safe. Just hauled off and kicked it with his $800 Italian leather shoe, leaving a scuff mark on the brass. "Forget the safe," Karen hissed. "We'll get a locksmith after he's gone." "But Bob, we need to talk about the nursing home situation." I've been researching facilities. There's a state-run place in Newark that takes Medicaid, $1,800 a month. We can move him there next week if he's still lingering. Bob stood up, brushing dust off his pants. "Next week." "Karen, we need to move faster. I've got creditors breathing down my neck. I need that life insurance payout, and I need it now. If he hangs on another 6 months, I'm screwed." That's when I saw it. Through the crack in the door, I saw Grandpa's hand of one hidden under the blanket, away from their view. It curled into a fist. Slowly, deliberately, the knuckles went white. And I knew the old Marine wasn't dying. He was 8 war, and he was about to win. Karen moved closer to the bed again, and this time her voice dropped to barely a whisper. But I heard it. Oh, I heard every word. "You know what the funny thing is, Dad? You always loved Leo more than any of us. You're a perfect little grandson. The one who stayed. The one who sacrificed. Well, guess what? The second you're gone, He's out. No money, no house. Nothing. We've already agreed. Bob and I split everything 50/50ths, and Leo gets thrown out like yesterday's trash. That's what loyalty gets you in this family. Absolutely nothing. I saw Grandpa's eyelid twitch. Just barely. Just enough. And I knew he'd heard enough. The recording had everything. The confession. The cruelty. The absolute moral bankruptcy of his own children. Bob was heading toward the door now, and Karen followed. "Let's go finish dinner," she said. "I want to go through his office tonight, see what other assets we can find before the lawyer comes tomorrow." They walked right past me in the hallway, didn't even glance my direction, and I waited until their footsteps faded down the stairs before I slipped into Grandpa's room. He opened his eyes sharp, clear, fully alert, and looked at me with a smile that would have made a shark nervous. "Did you get all that on the backup recording?" he asked. Nada. We'd hidden a second audio recorder in the bookshelf, just in case. Every word, Grandpa. He sat up in bed, pulled the oxygen tube out of his nose, and cracked his knuckles. Good, because Mr. Henderson is going to be here in 30 minutes, and we've got one more signature to make. Let's finish this. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:15 p.m. Right in the middle of Karen explaining to Bob why she deserved the executive producer credit on Grandpa's estate liquidation. I remember the exact time because I looked at the grandfather clock in the hall with a one Grandpa, brought back from Germany after World War II, and I thought, this is it. The moment everything changes. My hands were shaking when I went to answer the door, but I kept them in my pockets so nobody would see. Mr. Henderson stood on the porch in a charcoal suit, snowflakes melting on his shoulders, carrying that leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car. He'd been Grandpa's attorney for 40 years, handled his business deals, his investments, his estate planning. He knew where every penny was buried and every skeleton was hidden. And right now, his face was completely unreadable, that perfect lawyer poker face that could mean anything or nothing. "Good evening, Leo," he said quietly, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, and when he looked me in the eye, I swear I saw the tiniest hint of a smile. "Is the family all here?" In the dining room, I managed to say. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He nodded, stepped inside, and I closed the door behind him. The sound of it clicking shut felt final, like a vault locking, like a trap snapping closed. We walked down the hallway together, and I could hear Karen's voice getting louder as we approached. "And another thing, Bob, when we sell the Mercedes, I get first pick of the next." She stopped mid-sentence when we walked in. Everyone turned, and the look on Karen's face was priceless, this weird mix of surprise, hope, and something that almost looked like relief. She stood up immediately, smoothing down her designer dress, putting on that fake smile she wore at country club luncheons. "Mr. Henderson! Oh, thank God you're here. We were just discussing Dad's situation." She gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. "I assume you've brought the paperwork we discussed. The mental incapacity declaration." I felt my stomach drop. They'd been planning this behind Grandpa's back, trying to declare him mentally incompetent so they could take control of his accounts before he even died. Bob stood up too, walking over with his hand extended for a shake. Perfect timing. "Henderson, we need to move fast on this. My father is clearly not in any state to manage his own affairs, and frankly, it's irresponsible of you to have let this go on so long. We're talking about millions of dollars being managed by a man who can't even remember what day it is." Mr. Henderson didn't shake Bob's hand. He just looked at it hanging in the air until Bob awkwardly dropped it. "I came at the urgent request of my client," Henderson said, his voice flat and professional. "I have documents that require immediate attention." He set the briefcase on the table right next to that baby monitor that had been silently witnessing everything all night. Karen's eyes lit up like Christmas morning, like she was 8 years old again, and Santa had brought her everything on her list. Of course, whatever needs to be signed, we're ready. Bob and I have already discussed the division of assets, and we have a very fair proposal." That she was already reaching for her reading glasses, already pulling out a chair like she was about to sign her name on the dotted line and claim her kingdom. "Actually, Mrs. Predison," Henderson interrupted, and something in his tone made her freeze. "You and your brother are not the clients I'm referring to. You are merely interested parties, beneficiaries, perhaps, or perhaps not. That remains to be seen. He clicked open the briefcase, and I watched Karen's face go from excited to confused to worried in about 3 seconds flat. Bob wasn't getting it yet. He was still in aggressive negotiation mode. Look, Henderson, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but we're the next of kin here. We're the ones who've been dealing with Dad's decline. We're the ones who... And that's when it happened. That's when the baby monitor crackled to life, and every single person in that room went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard a snowflake land on the window, and then Grandpa Arthur's voice came through crystal clear, strong as thunder. With that commanding officer tone that made grown men snap to attention, Bob, sit down and shut up. Karen, put down my mother's wine glass before you break another one. And both of you pay very close attention to what happens next. The color drained from Karen's face so fast, I thought she might faint. Bob's mouth was hanging open like a fish gasping for air. My cousin Sarah made this little squeaking sound and grabbed the edge of the table. And Mr. Henderson? He finally smiled. Just a little. Just enough. He pulled out a thick document with a blue backing sheet and set it on the table. As I was saying, he continued, I'm here at the request of my client, Arthur James Morrison, to execute his newly revised last will and testament, signed and notarized exactly 47 minutes ago in the presence of 2 witnesses and myself. All parties were of sound mind and body. All legal requirements have been met. And now, he looked directly at Karen and Bob. It's time for you to hear what your father really thinks of you. Grandma's voice came through that monitor again, and this time, there was no warmth in it. No grandfatherly affection. This was Colonel Arthur Morrison, the man who'd commanded 200 Marines in combat. The man who'd built a $50 million empire from nothing. The man who did not suffer fools or traitors. Let me tell you what I've been doing for the past 6 hours while you vultures picked apart my home. I've been listening. Every word. Every insult. Every plan you made to warehouse me and some Medicaid nursing home while you burned through my money like it was Monopoly cash. Karen's wine glass slipped from her hand. It didn't shatter this time, it just rolled across the table, spilling a red stain across the white linen like blood. She was shaking, actually physically shaking. Bob tried to interrupt. Dad, we can explain, but Grandpa's voice cut him off like a knife. Shut your mouth, Robert. You've talked enough. Now it's my turn. The room felt like it was shrinking, like the walls were closing in. I was standing near the doorway, and I could see everyone's face. Just the panic, the fear, the desperate calculation happening behind their eyes as they tried to figure out how much he'd heard and how much damage control they'd need to do. But it was too late, way too latchy. Grandpa had already dropped the first bomb. Now, he was going for the nuclear option. Karen, my darling daughter, let's talk about you first. Do you remember your mother's estate? When she died 5 years ago, she had $380,000 in her personal account. Money she'd saved from a teaching salary over 40 years. Money she wanted split equally between you and Bob. You were the executor. And somehow that account was empty within 6 months. You claimed it was medical bills, elder care, expenses, legal fees. He paused, and the silence was devastating. I hired a forensic accountant. Want to know what he found. $240,000 transferred to your personal checking account. Another $80,000 to a shell company you created to manage the estate. You stole from your own mother's corpse. I watched Karen's face turn from white to gray to a color I didn't know human skin could turn. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just this weird, gasping sound like a fish drowning in air. Bob was staring at her with this look of absolute betrayal, not because she'd stolen from their mother, but because she'd gotten more than him. That's the kind of people they were. But Grandpa wasn't done with Bob either. Oh no. He'd saved something special for his son. And you, Robert. My boy. My heir apparent. Should we talk about your gambling debts? The $400,000 you owe to that casino in Atlantic City. Or maybe we should discuss the $180,000 you borrowed from my business account. Last year, the loan you said was for expansion opportunities, but actually went straight to your bookie. I have the bank records, son. I have the wire transfers. I know about the online poker. I know about the sports betting. I know everything. Bob's face went from shock to rage so fast, I thought he might have a stroke. He stood up, knocking his chair backward. "You had no right to investigate me." That's invasion of privacy. His voice was getting higher, more desperate. You could hear the panic underneath the anger. "Those are my personal affairs." "Your personal affairs?" Grandpa's voice came through the monitor like a thunderclap, and I swear the crystal chandelier rattled. "You stole from my company. You lied to my face. And tonight you stood in my bedroom while I was supposedly dying and tried to break into my safe like a common thief. I saw you kick it, you idiot. There's a camera in the smoke detector. I have video footage of everything." The room erupted. Karen was crying now, not sad tears, but angry, frustrated tears of someone who just realized their con had been exposed. Bob was yelling something about lawyers and defamation. Sarah was trying to sink into her chair like she could disappear. And Mr. Henderson just stood there, calm as a statue, one hand resting on that briefcase full of legal documents that was about to change all of our lives forever. But Grandpa wasn't finished. He had one more revelation. And this one was for everyone. You want to know the worst part? The part that really broke my heart. It wasn't the stealing. It wasn't the greed. It was what you said about Leo. His voice softened just a little, and I felt my throat tighten. That boy gave up everything for me. He was accepted to medical school, full scholarship to Johns Hopkins. Did you know that? He turned it down to take care of me. He's spent 3 years changing my catheter, making my meals, sitting with me through the night when I couldn't sleep. And you. The steel came back into his voice. You planned to throw him out on the street without a penny the second I died. Well, congratulations. You've shown me exactly who you are. And now I'm going to show you exactly what that costs. Mr. Henderson lifted the document. "Shall we proceed with the reading?" he asked, and his tone suggested it wasn't really a question. Karen collapsed back into her chair, mascara running down her cheeks. Bob was gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. And me, I was trying not to cry, trying not to break down, because Grandpa had just told a room full of people that I mattered, that I was worth something, that I wasn't just the help. And after 3 years of being treated like furniture, those words hit me harder than any inheritance ever could. But the inheritance was coming. Oh, it was definitely coming. Mr. Henderson opened the document with the kind of deliberate slowness that told me he was enjoying this. 40 years of dealing with this family's drama, and tonight he finally got to watch justice happen in real time. He cleared his throat, adjusted his reading glasses, and began. "This is the last will and testament of Arthur James Morrison, executed on December 24th at 7:43 p.m. in the presence of 2 witnesses and myself as notary. Mr. Morrison was evaluated by Dr. Patricia Chun at 6:30 p.m. this evening and deemed to be of completely sound mind, excellent cognitive function, and full legal capacity. Her signed affidavit is attached." Karen's lawyer brain kicked in through her panic. Wait. He was supposed to be in a coma. She looked at the baby monitor like it had betrayed her, which I guess it had. "This is fraud. This is entrapment. We'll contest this so fast, but Mr. Henderson held up one hand, and something about the gesture made her stop talking. "Mrs. Patterson, I strongly advise you to remain silent and listen. Any statements you make right now could be used against you in the criminal proceedings that may follow. Criminal proceedings." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Bob's face went pale. "Crimina, what the hell are you talking about?" Henderson didn't even look at him. He just continued reading. Article 3, specific to my daughter Karen Elizabeth Patterson, I leave the sum of $1 to be paid in cash, to ensure that she cannot claim to have been accidentally omitted from this will. He paused. Let that sink in. $1? Karen made this strangled sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. Additionally, I leave to Karen all outstanding medical bills, nursing care invoices, and pharmaceutical costs incurred during the last 10 years of my care. Total amount to $847,000. These debts are to be paid from her personal assets within 90 days of my death. As she so generously offered to handle my affairs in multiple recorded conversations, I watched the blood drain from Karen's face. $847,000. She didn't have that kind of money. Nobody at this table had that kind of liquid cash. They'd all been living beyond their means for years, counting on Grandpa's death to bail them out. Her boutique was failing. Her husband's law practice was barely breaking even. This would bankrupt her, completely destroy her. Henderson continued, his voice never changing tone. To my son, Robert James Morrison, I leave the sum of $1 to be paid in cash. For the same legal reasons stated above. Bob was already shaking his head, already starting to stand up, but Henderson's next words stopped him cold. Additionally, I leave to Robert fuller responsibility for repaying the $180,000 he embezzled from Morrison Industries between January and November of this year. Furthermore, I am directing my executor to file criminal charges for corporate embezzlement and fraud. The evidence has been turned over to the district attorney's office. A warrant for your arrest will be issued within 72 hours. Bob's knees buckled. He actually stumbled backward and had to catch himself on the sideboard. You can't, that's insane, I'll fight this. But his voice was weak. Defeated, he knew. He knew that Grandpa had him dead to rights, and there was no way out. The old man had documentation, bank records, witnesses. Bob wasn't just losing his inheritance. He was going to prison. Sarah, Bob's daughter, started crying. Not loud, dramatic subs just. Quiet tears streaming down her face as she watched her father's life implode in real time. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered how she'd laughed when Bob threw that napkin at me. How she'd nodded along when they discussed throwing me out on the street. Mr. Henderson turned the page, and I saw him glance at me, just for a second. And then he read the words that would change my entire life. Article for primary beneficiary. To my grandson, Leonardo Marcus Morrison, who has shown me more love, loyalty, and selflessness than I ever deserved. I leave the following: the Morrison family estate and all contents therein, valued at $4.2 million. The beach house in Montauk and all furnishings, valued at $2.8 million. The stock portfolio held in Morrison Trust accounts, $7,743, current value $18.6 million. The corporate bonds and treasury securities and safety deposit box, 191, valued at $8.4 million. And finally, the offshore trust account in the Cayman Islands, which contains $16.8 million in liquid assets. The room went silent. You could have heard a heart stop beating. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Those numbers, they didn't feel real. They felt like something from a movie or a dream. $50 million, $50 million. I'd been living on $30,000 a year from my nursing job. Eating ramen half the week to save money for Grandpa's medications, and the whole time he'd been sitting on $50 million that he was planning to give to me. Karen found her voice first, and it came out as a scream. Nitrogen monoxide? Absolutely not. This is undue influence. He manipulated a sick old man. He poisoned Dad's mind against us. She lunged across the table, trying to grab the will, trying to rip it up. But Henderson was faster. He pulled it back. And two men I hadn't even noticed standing in the doorway, security guards in dark suits, stepped forward. Mrs. Patterson, I need you to step back. This is only a copy. The original has been filed with the probate court and stored in our vault. Destroying this document will accomplish nothing except adding additional charges to your growing list of legal problems. Bob was hyperventilating now, his face purple with rage. You little snake. You manipulative little bastard. You seduced him. You brainwashed him. We'll take this to court. We'll fight this for years. You'll spend every penny on lawyers before you see a dime. But Grandpa's voice cut through the chaos one more time. And this time there was something almost sad in it. Almost. Bob, Karen, I give you every chance. Every opportunity to be decent human beings, and you failed. Spectacularly. You want to know why Leo gets everything? It's simple. He was there. When I was sick at 3 a.m., vomiting from chemo, too weak to make it to the bathroom, he was there. When I fell in the shower and thought I'd broken my hip, I was there. When I woke up from nightmares about the war and couldn't remember where I was, he was there. Not once did he ask me for money. Not once did he complain. Not once did he treat me like a burden or an inconvenience. He treated me like I was still a man worth something, and that my children is worth more than all your business degrees and country club memberships combined. You're dismissed. Get out of my house. I stood up from my seat at the end of the table, that servant spot, where I'd eaten every meal for 3 years, where I'd been invisible, where I'd been nothing, and I walked slowly, deliberately, down the length of that mahogany table that had been in the Morrison family for 4 generations, past Sarah, who was crying into her hands, past Bob, who looked like he'd aged 20 years in the last 20 minutes, past Karen, who was staring at me with so much hatred I could practically feel it burning through my skin. And I sat down in Grandpa's chair, the head of the table, the seat of power. The leather was still warm from where he'd sat that morning, before we'd staged his coma, before we'd set this entire trap. I placed my hands flat on the table, feeling the smooth wood under my palms, and I looked at each of them in turn. Karen, Bob, Sarah, the cousins who'd stopped talking, the friends who were actually real estate appraisers, now looking extremely uncomfortable and edging toward the door. And I said, in a voice that came out steadier and colder than I knew I was capable of, as the new owner of this property, I have one very simple rule. I don't allow trespasser. You have 5 minutes to collect your coats and leave before I call the police for criminal trespassing. Bob exploded. He absolutely lost it. He lunged toward me, hands outstretched like he was going to grab me by the throat, screaming, "You think you can throw me out? This is my father's house. I grew up. You're nothing but a gold-digging little." He didn't finish that sentence, because the 2 security guards who'd been standing quietly by the door moved so fast they were a blur. They had Bob's arms pinned behind his back before he could take 3 steps, lifting him slightly off his feet. "Mr. Morrison," one of them said to me, "would you like us to remove this individual from the premises?" And oh my God, hearing someone call me Mr. Morrison, hearing someone ask for my permission, treating me like I was the one in charge, it was surreal. It was powerful. It was everything I'd never let myself dream about, because I thought I was just the help, just the grandson who'd never be good enough. "Yes," I said. "Please escort Mr. Robert Morrison off the property. He is no longer welcome here." Bob was screaming, thrashing, threatening lawsuits and violence and everything in between as they dragged him toward the front door. "You're dead. You hear me? You're dead. I'll destroy you. I'll take everything. You'll regret this for the rest of your miserable." The front door slammed, cutting off his threats, and the house suddenly felt quieter, cleaner, like a poison had been removed. Karen was on her feet now, but she wasn't violent like Bob. She was calculating. I could see her lawyer brain working overtime, trying to find an angle, a loophole, some way to turn this disaster around. "Leo," she said, and her voice was syrupy sweet, completely different from how she'd spoken to me an hour ago. "Leo, honey, let's talk about this. Like adults. I know things got heated, but we're family. We can work this out. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Your grandfather wasn't in his right mind." And stop. I held up one hand, and she actually stopped talking. That felt good. Really good. "Karen, I have recordings of everything you said tonight. About warehousing Grandpa in a state facility, about stealing Mom's estate money, about planning to throw me out the second he died. Mr. Henderson has copies. The police have copies. The DA has copies. So please, don't insult my intelligence by pretending you care about family now." Her mask slipped. The sweetness vanished, replaced by pure venom. "You self-righteous little prick. You think you're better than us. You gave up med school to wipe an old man's ass for 3 years? That's not noble to ask, pathetic. You're pathetic. And this?" She gestured wildly around the room. "This won't last. You don't know how to manage money. You don't know how to run a business. You'll blow through $50 million in 5 years and end up working at some urgent care clinic for $60,000 a year. And you'll realize you threw away your entire future for nothing." I stood up, walked around the table until I was right in front of her, close enough to see the mascara streaks on her cheeks, close enough to smell the expensive perfume that Grandpa had bought her for her birthday last year, back when he still hoped she might remember he existed. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "I gave up med school. I gave up relationships. I gave up my 20s. But I didn't give them up for nothing, Karen. I gave them up for love, for family, for a man who raised me when my parents died, who taught me what honor and integrity actually mean. And you know what? I'd do it again. Every single time. Because at the end of the day, I can look at myself in the mirror. Can you..." She didn't have an answer for that. She just grabbed her purse, grabbed her coat, and stormed toward the door. But she stopped at the threshold and turned back one more time. "This isn't over, Leo. We'll contest the will." We'll tie this up in court for years. You'll never see a penny. I smiled. Actually smiled, because Mr. Henderson had already explained this part to me. You can try, but Grandpa had Dr. Chun evaluate him 6 hours ago specifically to prevent that challenge. He has video evidence of his mental competency. He has audio recordings of your confession. And most importantly, he has ironclad legal language that states any beneficiary who contests the will automatically forfeits their $1 inheritance and becomes responsible for all legal fees incurred during litigation. So please, Karen, contest it. I'd love to watch you pay $200,000 in lawyer bills just to lose. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second she realized she was beaten, completely and utterly defeated. She walked out without another word, and the security guards closed the door behind her. Sarah left next, not saying anything, just giving me this look that might have been apologetic or might have been resentful. I honestly couldn't tell and didn't care. And then it was just me, Mr. Henderson, and the 2 guards in that huge, suddenly empty dining room. The appraisers Mrs. Pedersen brought have already left through the side entrance, Henderson said, organizing papers back into his briefcase. They've signed NDAs and won't be discussing anything they witnessed tonight. The security team was hired by your grandfather 3 weeks ago when he first suspected his children might try something during the holidays. They've been paid through the end of the month and will remain on the property if you'd like them to. 3 weeks ago, Grandpa had been planning this for 3 weeks. He'd known exactly what Karen and Bob were, and he'd set up this entire operation like a military campaign. Because that's who he was. A strategist. A warrior. A man who didn't lose. I looked around the dining room, the scattered napkins, the half-empty wine glasses, the turkey that nobody had really eaten because they'd been too busy planning their inheritance. And I thought about all the Christmases before this one, when Grandpa and Grandma had filled this house with laughter and love and family. Before Grandma died, before Bob's gambling got bad, before Karen turned into whatever she'd become. And I made a decision right there. This house would be full of love again someday. Not tonight. Tonight, it needed to be quiet. But someday, thank you, Mr. Henderson, I said, shaking his hand. For everything? He nodded. And for the first time all night, he actually smiled a real, genuine smile. Your grandfather is an extraordinary man, Leo, and so are you. Merry Christmas. He left, and the guards followed. And then I was alone in the house. Completely alone, except I wasn't, because Grandpa was still upstairs, waiting to hear how it all ended. And I had one more conversation to have before this night was truly over. The house was so quiet I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down the seconds until midnight, until Christmas Day officially began. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a moment, just breathing, trying to process everything that had just happened. My hands were still shaking. My heart was still racing, and I realized I was exhausted, not physically tired, but emotionally drained in a way I'd never experienced before. 3 years of being invisible, of being treated like nothing, and then in one night, everything had changed. Everything. I climbed the stairs slowly, my footsteps creaking on the old wood, and when I reached Grandpa's room, I found the door already open. He was sitting up in bed, fully dressed now in his favorite flannel shirt and khaki pants, the coma patient costume completely abandoned. The oxygen tube was gone. The heart monitor was disconnected and sitting on the nightstand. And he was eating a full plate of turkey, mashed potatoes, and stuffing that I'd hidden in the mini fridge in his bathroom earlier today, keeping it warm for after the show. Well, he said, looking at me with those sharp blue eyes that had never dimmed for a second. Did they go quietly? Or did Bob try to take a swing at you? I couldn't help. Itai laughed. After the tension and the fear and the anger, I just laughed. Bob tried. The security guys had him out the door in about 10 seconds. Karen threatened to contest the will. Sarah just cried and left. And the house is ours. All ours. Grantier nodded slowly, chewing his turkey, and I saw something in his expression that I hadn't seen in a long time. Relief. Like he'd been carrying a weight for years and had finally set it down. Come here, son, he said, patting the bed next to him. I sat down, and he handed me a glass of grape juice from the nightstand. He couldn't drink alcohol with his medications, so we'd always toast it with juice instead. I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. He set his plate aside and turned to face me fully. When your parents died in that accident, you were 11 years old. Do you remember what happened after the funeral? I nodded. Of course I remembered. You and Grandma took me in. No questions asked. Just opened your home and made me part of your family. He smiled, but there were tears in his eyes now. That's not exactly how it happened, Leo. Karen and Bob fought me on it. They said you should go into foster care, that I was too old to raise another child, that it would be too expensive. They didn't want me wasting their inheritance on you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd never known that. Never even suspected. They tried to put me in foster care. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Grandpa nodded. They fought me in court for 6 months, but I was a stubborn old Marine, and I had better lawyers. I won custody. And from that day forward, Karen and Bob treated you like an outsider, like you'd stolen something from them. And that's why tonight hurts so much. Leo, because when I got sick 3 years ago and you dropped everything to take care of me, you proved you were more family than either of them ever was. I felt tears running down my face, and I didn't bother wiping them away. Grandpa reached over and gripped my shoulder with that strong hand that had held rifles and signed business contracts and wiped away my tears when I was 11 and thought the world had ended. You didn't give up your future for me, son. You invested in something more valuable than any medical degree. You invested in love, in loyalty, in being the kind of man who shows up when things get hard. And that's why I left you everything. Not because you earned it by taking care of me, though. God knows you did. But because you're the only one who understood what family really means. We sat there in silence for a moment, and then he picked up his grape juice and held it out. To family, he said. The real kind, the kind you choose. I picked up my glass and clinked it against his. To family, we drank, and it was the best grape juice I'd ever tasted. Better than any champagne. Better than anything. So what happens now? I asked. What do we do tomorrow? Grandpa smiled that mischievous smile that meant he was already 3 steps ahead. Tomorrow we sleep in. We make a real Christmas breakfast, none of that fancy nonsense Karen always insisted on. Just pancakes and bacon. And then we start planning what to do with that beach house. I'm thinking we turn it into something good. A retreat for veterans, maybe, or a scholarship fund, something that matters. He paused, looking out the window at the snow falling softly over the estate, something that would make your grandmother proud. I looked out the window too, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope, not just hope for the future, but peace with the present. The house was quiet, the vultures were gone, and the man who'd raised me, the man who'd fought for me when I was 11 and couldn't fight for myself, was still here, still breathing, still planning how to change the world one good deed at a time. Merry Christmas, Grandpa Lassette. He put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me close, the way he used to when I was a kid having nightmares. Merry Christmas, Leo. Now finish your juice and help me beat your high score on that racing game downstairs. I've been practicing while you thought I was in a coma. And you know what? That's exactly what we did. We went downstairs, turned on the old gaming console, and played video games until 2 in the morning, laughing like we had all the time in the world. Because for the first time in a long time, maybe we did. 3 months have passed since that Christmas dinner, and I'm sitting in Grandpa's study, my study now, I guess, though it still feels weird to say that, watching the snow fall outside the same window where we toasted with grape juice on Christmas night. Karen and Bob tried to contest the will, just like she threatened. It lasted exactly 2 weeks before their lawyers saw the evidence and advised them to drop it. The recordings, the video footage, Dr. Chun's evaluation, it was airtight, bulletproof. Grandpa hadn't left them any room to maneuver. Bob took a plea deal on the embezzlement charges, 18 months in minimum security, restitution payments that'll keep him broke for the next decade. Karen's facing her own legal trouble. Stearns, out stealing from your dead mother's estate is still fraud, even if your family. Her boutique closed last month. Her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. And me. I'm not happy about their suffering, but I'm not losing sleep over it either. They made their choices. Now they're living with the consequences. Grandpa's doing great, by the way. Turnauchi that terminal decline was mostly him being depressed about his kid's behavior and stopping his physical therapy. Once we got him back on a proper routine, once the stress of Karen and Bob's constant demands was gone, he bounced back like a man 20 years younger. We're converting the beach house into a veterans retreat, just like he wanted. First group arrives in May, and I'm starting medical school in the fall. Johns Hopkins agreed to defer my acceptance. And with Grandpa's health stable, I can actually do it now. Turns out, you can have both. Family and dreams. You just need people who actually support you. But here's what I learned from all of this, and I need you to understand this part. Money didn't make me rich that night. Love did. Loyalty did. Showing up when it mattered, even when nobody was watching, even when there was no guarantee of reward, that's what made the difference. Karen and Bob spent their whole lives calculating, strategizing, trying to position themselves for the big payout. And they lost everything. I spent 3 years just trying to make my grandfather's last days comfortable. And I gained a family, a future, and a legacy that's about more than dollar signs. They wanted his money. I wanted his time. And in the end, I got both. But you know what? As crazy as my story is, as unbelievable as that Christmas dinner was, the next story is about a betrayal that cuts even deeper. Because imagine this. You've been the breadwinner for years. You paid for your husband to get through law school while working 2 jobs. You paid for your baby sister's college tuition because your parents couldn't afford it. You trusted them completely. They were your world. Until one day, you come home early from a business trip, just one day early, and you find them together in your bed, in your house, planning how they're going to stage your accident and split your life insurance payout. What would you do if you had the power to freeze every account they had access to with a single phone call? What would you do if you could watch their entire world crumble in real time while they had no idea you knew? That's the next story. And trust me, the revenge is ice cold.